All right, so for those of you that don't know me, I am Chelsea Cohen, and I am the co-founder of SoStock.com. I am also an Amazon seller. My background is an Amazon seller, and that is kind of what led me into inventory management and having to really become good at inventory management. It was just a matter of not really being as profitable as I wanted to. So really knowing that inventory was a big part of the business that I wasn't really doing as well as I could. And so that led me down the path of trying to find a tool, and no tools really worked the way I wanted. So I created SoStock. So I've basically spent the last 3 years sleeping and breathing inventory management. I've talked to hundreds of sellers about inventory management. I have brought hundreds of sellers into our software, and in those times we've done one-on-one calls, with 6, 7, and 8-figure sellers. What is it about inventory management for Amazon that people are getting tripped up on? What are the things that we can put in place that will actually fix that? And so we built that into the software. But the whole idea is that you need to have best practices for inventory management. And a lot of people just haven't. They haven't set up the best practices. So we will, briefly cover that. I also have other trainings where I go in more depth about best practices, which will work across the board. But what I really specifically wanted to talk about in this talk was how much has shifted with the new storage type limits, and what are the shifts that you need to make in your business to be able to account for those changes, to be able to survive. I do truly believe that if you don't pivot and you don't shift the way that you're doing things, you're just going to get eaten up by stockouts and by fees. We've got a lot of third-party logistics center fees that will be coming up for a lot of people. We've got a lot of cash flow issues that are going to be a problem. So you need to take a creative approach to how you are shifting those things around in your business. How are you handling marketing? How are you handling your logistics? And how are you handling your cash flow beyond just the inventory management? It touches all those points. So I'm going to give you some tips and some data on the ways that things should be restructured to better help you guys to actually, have a path forward and to be able to truly scale even with the restrictions from Amazon for these restock limits. All right, and feel free to type something in the chat. I may get to it if it's relevant at that time. Otherwise, we'll save it to the end. And I always tend to offer some, free goodies, things like marketing planners that tie into your inventory. So if you do stay on the webinar, I will be sending those out to the people who did join us on this webinar. So you guys should be getting those as well. And then the replay, of course, if you have team members who should be on the call or you who wanted to be on the call but just couldn't, we will be sending out a replay. All right, let me do a quick screen share. Okay, cool. So storage type inventory strategies. So understanding and managing according to the new storage algorithm. All right, so I did talk a little bit about me. I started selling in 2014 and have worked with a lot of different sellers. Really, my passion is helping sellers to do better in business. I have done that a lot with my copywriting agency. And then when I saw the inventory management issue and that it wasn't being properly addressed for Amazon sellers, I decided, that maybe I could do something about it. And, I had all these troubles. Basically, a lot of things were going wrong with my inventory. I stocked out during Christmas one time and lost $30,000 worth of sales. I, have lost, a month here, a month there, just, income losses and all of the things that go along with that, or over ordering products, paying thousands of dollars in storage fees. And, then if you take out a loan, all the loan interest, this might be familiar to you. It's probably pretty familiar to pretty much any business that's been around for, more than 6 months. But I really wanted to solve that problem. So actually I met this guy. This is Dan Fernandez. He's the co-founder of Thomason.com. I had no experience in building software, but I knew the problem I wanted to solve. And he had the experience of building softwares. He's been building softwares for over 10 years. So really plugged into his team, and we created SoStock, you know, based on my experience, but also, like I said, based on the experience of hundreds of sellers that we worked in beta for our software on. So that's kind of our background. All right, so the first thing that you have to understand really is, you know, what are the most important things about storage type limits? There can be some confusion because in 2020, we had not really heard of or been talking about the IPI score, the Inventory Performance Index score. And so that was everything mid to end of 2020. And then it kind of became, it actually all shifted on the 22nd of April when storage type limits were introduced. An Inventory Performance Index scores are important for, you know, as long as you keep them up to 500, you're fine. But if you get it below 500, you get into storage volume issues. But storage type limits have to do with the number of units. So most of you probably already know that. So what I really wanted to talk about is, you know, understanding Amazon's intention and understanding the most important key metrics. So Amazon never really intended to be a storage facility. They always intended to be a distribution center. This is important to understand because over the years, they have become a storage facility. They have become, you know, the place where dud products go to die. And they have tried in different ways to incentivize us to move our inventory out of their warehouses, doing things like offering free removals toward the end of the year each year, other things like raising the cost per unit on the storage. And none of this seems to dissuade us enough so that we make it a focus of our business. So this new change has forced us to make it a focus of our business in a very clever and kind of awful way. But it's something that we all have to learn to adapt to now. I don't think it's going away. So the most important metric that you should be focusing on in your business now is sell-through. This is what Amazon is trying to force us to do. And so in understanding sell-through, you need to understand all the moving parts of sell-through. And sell-through actually has to do with it. It touches most of the points of the Inventory Performance Index. The Inventory Performance Index has to do with stranded inventory, which obviously can't be sold and can't be part of sell-through if you have stranded inventory, which means that your listing is not live for one reason or another, but you have inventory at Amazon. The other aspect that is being touched by sell-through is the excess inventory, because that's inventory that's not being sold. You have the aspect of stocking out, right? So if you stock out, then your sell-through rate is going to go down. And so all of these aspects are all part of the same thing. And if you really just focused on sell-through, then you would see that Amazon starts to actually treat you a lot better. They really want this to be the target of the inventory that you're sending to Amazon. All right, so let's talk about how Amazon calculates sell-through, because understanding how Amazon calculates sell-through will help you to better improve that ratio. And we often think of sell-through as how much inventory you sell on a monthly basis, or how long it takes you from the point your inventory arrives to the point you finish selling it. But what Amazon is looking at is something a little bit more specific. And this is a definition that you can get off of the Amazon website. I pulled it right from the Amazon website in Seller Central. And that's the FBA, your FBA rolling 90 days. So that's 90 days rolling, right? It's not recalculating, it's recalculating on a rolling basis. It's not, you know, once a quarter, they're going to calculate it. They're calculating it on a rolling 90 days. So your FBA rolling 90-day sell-through rate is the number of your units sold and shipped over the past 90 days divided by the average number of units available at fulfillment centers during that time. Right? So let's look at how that breaks down. So you have the units sold or shipped within 90 days, and then you divide it by the average units available, and that would be your sell-through rate. So if you sold 9,000 units within that 90-day period, or 3,000 units per month, and then you actually kept 3,000 units per month on average, so you're replenishing on a monthly basis, that would be a monthly turnover rate. But when you look at your IPI scores and you look at what Amazon is saying your sell-through rate is, you would see a 3 there instead of a 1, because it's a 90-day turnover. So a monthly turnover would be a sell-through rate of 3. And if you had more of a quarterly turnover, where you were selling 9,000 units and you were keeping 9,000 units at Amazon, that would be more of a sell-through rate of 1. So the higher the sell-through rate, the faster the turnover, right? All right, so now utilization. So it's important to understand how utilization is calculated, as utilization is part of sell-through rate, and you also have utilization as basically what your restock limits are. It helps to decide what you have available that you can send into Amazon. So you have FBA available inventory plus your reserved inventory plus any open shipments, and that's the utilization quantity. How much are you of the space you're allotted? How much of the restock limits are you actually using? And then whatever's left over is what you can send in, right? So this is how the relationship between sell-through and utilization breaks down. So you have units sold and shipped within 90 days, and that's divided by your average units available. And if we look at the average units available, that's essentially our average utilization. So utilization factors very much into sell-through rate. And so when we know how that breaks down, we can start looking at how to improve things, especially as the decisions that you make now will be living with you for the next 90 days. So best practices for improving your restock limits. All right, some of these may be obvious and maybe things that you've already done, but I'm going to mention them because not everyone may have taken charge of this or have seen the importance, why it's so important to make these changes as soon as possible. Deleting unnecessary inbound shipments. Doing that right away is very important. It may be that you haven't done it yet because you, for some reason, don't need that space right now. But like I said, that's going to live with you for the next 90 days. So if you have a sales season coming up and you're going to need that space in the future, you want to remove those inbound shipments that you're not going to use, because it's taking up that space and it's going to be increasing your average utilization, which affects your sell-through rate. So it's going to be harming your sell-through rate until you get it off of your I guess inventory books, so to speak. So if you haven't done that, I would go ahead and do that right away. It's a really fast process. If you have any trouble, you can contact seller support, but it's one of those quick win things that you can do. All right, removal orders and fire sales. So this is a fast way to get rid of some excess inventory that you have sitting there. Consider removing anything between 60 and 90 days worth of inventory. And so again, these are two different types of approaches. There's a couple of different ways to handle each of these. But the removal orders are less favorable than something like a fire sale. A fire sale could also be considered a flash sale. This is just basically a way of decreasing your price and getting inventory moved out as quickly as possible. The difference is that when you do a removal order, it's not contributing to your sales velocity. And so if it's not contributing to your sales velocity, it's not helping towards your sell-through rate. So it'll clear out the space, but it will only do that. It'll just clear out the space. With a fire sale, you're clearing out the space, and at the same time, you're adding to your velocity. And because storage type limits allow us to distribute our velocity across our entire catalog, the sales on those will contribute towards freeing up space, but also increasing the velocity so that in the future, we can move more inventory into Amazon and potentially have our restock limit increased as well. So it's kind of doing two jobs. It's increasing your restock limits and it's making more space. It's kind of, you know, more bang for your buck. I would say also check out the new liquidation program that Amazon has. This would act as a removal order. And then the other thing that you might want to check out is to see if you apply or you qualify for something called outlet deals. You can find out about this if you go to the Manage Excess Inventory page on your inventory dashboard. The liquidation program, again, won't contribute to your velocity. It'll act more like a removal order, but the outlet deals will contribute to your velocity. So that might be the better way to go starting out, unless you really just need to get rid of that inventory as soon as possible. I'm going to check and see we have a question. Why these days is Amazon closing the status of shipments even before receiving the inventory? So Amazon is doing closing these shipments, and this kind of applies to, you know, the last slide that we were looking at. They issued, as soon as they made this change, they issued an announcement saying that if you are trying to send in inventory and you are already above your limit, we're going to cancel shipments. We are going to potentially cancel. It doesn't always happen, but I think it's happening more and more, especially, you know, in the days leading up to Prime Day. They would cancel shipments if you were trying to send in more inventory than you are allowed. So that's why that's happening. It's, you know, very frustrating. It's also very frustrating because Amazon in the weeks leading up to Prime Day, they actually lowered the restock limits. So things that you were able to send in while you were getting prepared, they then became less than that, over the limit, basically. Why does Amazon allow the shipment in the first place? Sometimes I think the shipment, it didn't get caught. The shipment, you know, was created before the limits were reduced. And so then after, when the limit was, you know, then reduced, it then conflicted with the schedule, with what was planned. And so then they had to cancel those shipments. Amazon is an imperfect system. Amazon, not all their algorithms make sense. Their algorithms do conflict. We've seen it with various different things. We've seen double counting when you sign up for the NARF program. We've seen the fact that they don't account for stock out. So they lower your restock limits, even though if you hadn't stocked out, you could have sold a lot more. And so their systems aren't perfect. And so if you're wondering why, you know, if Amazon does things that make sense, these are systems that are built by people that are not sellers, and they're built by people who are probably doing a bunch of other things and don't really think everything through. It's human beings that are creating these algorithms, and they can get things wrong. So, you know, we've seen that a lot, and their algorithms aren't very fully thought out all the time, especially when they have to push it really quickly because they're trying to control something like Prime Day. Good question. All right. So the next thing is smaller orders more frequently. Everyone knows that they probably have already switched to this. They've had to make smaller orders more frequently. And, you know, it's just the way that things are going to have to go. And so, you know, when I talked at the beginning about changing up your logistics, this is one of the things that I'm talking about. Your utilization and your sell-through are directly impacted by your FBA levels and the shipments that are added. So the quicker that you can get your inventory checked into Amazon and then sold through, the better, because that's essentially what sell-through is. So opening up these shipments and keeping these shipments for a long period of time, which used to be a way that people would, you know, kind of run their business, it's actually potentially putting a ding on your future restock limits. So you want to create those FBA labels, get them moved in as quickly as possible, and then sell through that inventory. So send more of what you're going to sell short term, and no longer sending, you know, thousands of units of a product that you haven't really tested, that you don't really know can be moved in the next month or two. On the same vein, faster FBA shipping times. So this idea that we used to have, or this technique that we used to do of creating shipping labels, putting them on our cartons, and then putting our goods on a slow boat from China, it eats up a lot of your potential utilization time. You have these open shipments and they're doing two things. They're getting into your utilization and may hurt that sell-through rate based on them increasing your average utilization. And that takes 90 days to basically push out of your calculations. And then the other aspect is that you may have local inventory that you want to send in, but because you've made these FBA shipments, you can no longer do that because you've got, slow ocean freight that is eating up the utilization that should be able to be used for that local inventory. So some of the things you might want to think about: smaller orders more frequently, sending them in, possibly doing air freight for some products if you can afford it, because otherwise you're going to have large storage fees, because now instead of working with FBA, you may have to work with a 3PL, and your 3PL will start charging you fees for packaging and sending it up in more replenishment orders. So it's something to kind of keep in mind, kind of reshifting your logistics a little bit when necessary. And I'll talk a little bit about things that you can do in working with your supplier to completely shift some of the logistics and some of the cash flow aspects so that you can better cope with some of the additional 3PL expenses. I got a quick little thing in the chat. Says, Sajad says, I have created shipment plans for 2,800 units. While creating a plan, I chose UPS as a carrier, but later I came to know my shipper would use truck delivery, and he said that there is no need to change in shipping plan. Now my shipment plan status is closed, and Amazon has given them a time of today to deliver the goods. Can I expect once my goods are there, my shipment plan will get back? It's possible. I have heard two things. I've heard of people getting their inventory just completely sent back. And I've also heard of Amazon just checking it in. Now that Prime Day is over, I would kind of bet that there's a better chance that they'll just check it in. And, but I think that as Prime Day was increasing, because there wasn't that room, they were just being a lot more diligent at returning that inventory back to where it came from. So, I would say hold your breath, see what happens, and hopefully it will be checked in. Otherwise, there's nothing you can really do. But, it's better to roll the dice. And if it's already on its way, it's better to roll the dice and see what happens, because either way, you're going to incur that expense. So, I'd say, give it its best shot, and then maybe you can, let us know what happens. All right. So I'm going to move on. So the tip that I wanted to mention here, as we're talking about using more 3PLs, one of the tips to reducing warehousing fees is to consider increasing the number of units per carton. This could have a huge impact on your per carton fees at your 3PL. So if you have to have your cartons labeled and they're, and handled, the more cartons you have, the more cost, because generally a 3PL will charge you per carton fees. They'll charge you per carton fees, they'll charge you labeling fees, and they'll charge you labor fees. So if you can put more units in less cartons, then you can decrease the number of cartons for your order. And that could save you significantly. We looked at that for one of our products, and I think it was just going from 8 units per carton to 10 units per carton. And the financial impact of that, and it wasn't a top selling product, I think that product alone was a savings of $8,000 per year. So it can be significant. This is something that you should look at across your entire catalog, and potentially work with a good inspection company who can actually check and make sure that these are being packaged correctly. Because if you put too many units per carton, it can crush, and then your units arrive and they're crushed and they can't be used, and then you have a whole other problem. But working with your supplier and potentially an inspection company to reconfigure this would be potentially a very big savings for you. All right. Next, lower FBA buffer stock. I'm going to say this with not just a little bit of caution. If you're keeping a lot of inventory at Amazon and you want 60 days worth of inventory at Amazon, or you have even 45 days, I wouldn't go necessarily too low. Maybe, 30 days is just fine. But I do know that there are some people who keep higher amounts of inventory at FBA. Amazon did convey that one of the reasons that they were making this change in these policies was that they were trying to improve their check-in times. We know that a lot of times it's 3 to 4 weeks of check-in. It could be potentially, and sometimes 2 to 3 weeks to even get an appointment if you're doing, an LTL shipment, a less than truckload shipment, right? So it's important to consider that you can't yet trust Amazon. Maybe as they do improve things, we can lower the buffer stock. But as you do consider improving or lowering your FBA buffer stock to down to say 30, also keep additional stock at your third-party warehouse. You can have a buffer stock at your third-party warehouse, one at FBA. But if you plan to make that shift and lower your buffer stocks, do it with the Amazon check-in data that you have available and that you've seen throughout the community. All right, I have a couple of other comments here. Okay, what could your maximum size of a master carton be? I would actually have to look that up for you. The maximum size of a master carton. So it's something that Amazon should have available. I don't know it off the top of my head, but that's a very important thing to factor in. And I am glad that you're bringing it up, because maximum size and also very importantly, maximum weight. You will get charged fees if your size of your cartons is too large, and especially if it's too big, because they have issues with people if their workers can't lift certain things. It's kind of like the same thing as luggage. When you have over a certain amount, you get charged a fee because there's certain union rules about sending luggage and the luggage carriers at an airport having to lift things that are too heavy. So it's a very good point to bring up, is make sure that you're within those guidelines, or you're going to get slapped with a bunch of fees and you may get your stuff, sitting there for a little while they figure out what to do with it. All right. Okay, so above all, do not stock out. This is very bad for restock limits. The reason that it's bad for restock limits is that, like I mentioned before, Amazon doesn't factor the stock outs into your restock calculation. It's pretty shameful. This is actually a way that you can get into some real trouble. But if you have a product that's selling 100 units a day, you stock out for 10 days and miss out on 1,000 units worth of sales, Amazon's not going to give you the benefit of the doubt and give you those 1,000 units in your restock limit rolling over the next 90 days. They're going to just look at what you sold and start giving you based on what you sold. So that's how negatively your restock limits can be impacted, right? They haven't yet figured out that that's a big problem. So if you do stock out, here are a couple of different tips. First off, switch to FBM if you can. If you're stocking out because Amazon is late checking things in, switch to FBM and start fulfilling with FBM. I think that everyone should have an FBM fulfillment center, and that you should have your own distribution center. Your FBM fulfillment center is a distribution center. Don't let Amazon be your only distribution center. Most importantly, don't let anyone have all of your stuff. That is extremely important, but we forget about it. Like I mentioned, we stocked out during Christmas. Amazon actually lost our stuff. The reason we stocked out during Christmas, the second year of business, was because we sent everything to Amazon. Amazon conveniently lost it until after Christmas and then found it again. If we had only given them a portion, then we would have been fine, but we gave them everything. So don't let anyone have all your stuff. The same goes with putting everything on a boat. If that boat is late, you're going to be in trouble. So one of the things that we're doing now is we'll put a lot of our stuff onto the ocean freight, and then we'll leave some behind at our suppliers just in case that anything goes wrong with the boat, because there's so many things that are going wrong in the ports, in container shortages, that we don't want to take the chance that we're going to run out of stock. So if we have to, looking at the timeline, at a certain point, if our inventory doesn't look like it's going to be arriving, we'll have that excess inventory that we left at our supplier air shipped over, and we'll only take that air freight cost if we have to. But at least we aren't basically sitting ducks in the water with our ocean freight, tying up our entire business. So don't let anyone have all your stuff. Have flexibility, have a game plan. I think that this time with inventory management is all about flexibility and having multiple strategies for, if this happens, then I will do this. And that's what, the ability to switch to FBM also encompasses. So create a backup distribution channel. FBM, the FBM sales do help to keep your restock limits from crashing. So FBM sales contribute to your restock, and actually MCF sales do as well. So multi-channel fulfillment. So if you have, Shopify, for example, maybe Shopify should, you should divert some of your sales from Shopify and, for your other products, and borrow that velocity from your other products and fulfill through Amazon. So this is something to keep in mind. How can I continue to make my velocities, my velocity increase, or at least maintain, or at least not completely plummet while I have a stock out? Those are you have to start thinking of creative ways to increase your velocity or maintain your velocity even with the stock out. All right, we have a quick question. Okay, so Sajad says, I heard no side of the carton should increase 25 inches and you cannot pack more than 150 units in one carton. Yes, 150 units, I have seen that. But yes, just double check everything before you get your cartons put together. All right, so inventory-minded marketing. This is something that I have talked about quite a lot. Coordinating your marketing with your inventory is something that Amazon sellers tend to not really focus on. So it's actually caused a lot of stockouts in the past. If you have ever talked to a PPC agency and asked them the question of, have you ever stocked out your client, with your marketing tactics, all of them will say yes, they have. The ones that don't tend to stock their clients out are the ones that actually take a responsibility for inventory, and that's actually moving. It's moving in that direction. More and more brand managers and inventory managers and PPC agents are working with the vetting of the inventory against the marketing plans. That's something that you need to implement in your business. If those teams are not coordinated, then things are not going to go well. On the other side of it, marketers are so used to driving revenue. And so that has been for the past ever many years you've been working with your team, that's what their job has been primarily focused on. And so now they actually have to market across their entire catalog, and they have to move inventory as well. So they need to be responsible for revenue and for sell-through rate. And this is something that they haven't been familiar with doing, but that's how your marketing has to completely shift, is towards moving inventory out of FBA. So in order to do those things, you should be focused on getting specific coordination points in. And like I mentioned, I do have a template. We refer to it as the inventory-minded marketing template, and it helps to build out your marketing plans and so that they can be translated into inventory plans. So I will send that out when I do send the replay. So that is something that you should be implementing, but essentially it's the marketing plan being built out by marketing and then sending it to inventory so that they can vet it, and then they can let the marketing team know if there are any red flags. Perhaps there's a stock out for one of the SKUs and they need to actually slow down on the marketing, right? So the other things is inventory should be providing a stock out risk report, either weekly or monthly, right? Anything that is running low on stock, anything that could be, you know, maybe already stocked out before inventory arrives from, you know, the manufacturer or wherever. Also, slow sellers report so that you can decide whether you need to really be more aggressive and get that product ranking better, or you need to, you know, just sell through and not restock that product. And then a liquidation report. Another thing that I would add to this list would be an overstock report. What are the products that are overstocked that you just need to move some of that stock out so that you can make room for your better sellers? All right, so understanding inventory best practices. So you should be using a daily adjusted velocity. A daily adjusted velocity tends to remove the sales spikes, remove the stock outs. This is something that we built into SoStock, but it's something that you should be keeping track of. So if you have no way of keeping track of whether you stocked out and you stocked out last Christmas, that data needs to be added back into this Christmas's projection so you don't stock out again because your projections are low because they're based on bad data. That's something to keep in mind. If you don't plan on repeating that occasion, so if you don't plan on repeating that sales spike, if you don't plan on repeating that stock out, then you need a plan for it. So you want to use an average, a daily average, right? Know what you're selling on average per day, and then last year's sales. You want to use that data optionally as well. Like I said, stock outs, sales spikes, deep discounts. Growth trends would be a good thing to account for. Min-max restocking. So min-max restocking is a concept of having not only a buffer stock, but a maximum restock setting. So you would stock up to your maximum, sell through to your minimum, and then stock back up to your maximum. This is something that you can do that would essentially optimize your inventory levels, reduce stock outs. You can reduce high FBA storage fees, stay within your restock limits, and then be able to pass this task on to a VA, for example. Then I would say an inventory timeline, and I actually want to jump over into our SoStock system to show you what I mean. This is something that helps you to really visualize things. If we look at, okay, that one's a bad example. Here we go. Okay, so if we look at an inventory timeline, and this is something you can create on a spreadsheet, but if you're having a hard time visualizing why you keep running out of stock on a specific product, you can build out a timeline that looks at all of your inventory, your daily sales velocity, any sales plans that you might have. So if you have, say, for example, a lightning deal that you want to include, let's just change the date on this one. If you have a lightning deal that you want to include, you can actually see what is going to happen with your inventory on a daily basis to start to understand why you may be stocking out more often than you would like, right? You can see when the inventory is being checked in, see when you need to do another transfer, when that's going to be checked in, etc. So something I highly recommend, and something that, you know, a lot of sellers have been able to debug some of the issues as to, you know, what problems they're having. All right. So when you're setting up your inventory systems, just a quick recap, you should be working to remove sales spikes, remove stock outs, factor in lightning deals, project seasonality, track your orders and your transfers. I didn't get into the tracking system that we have, but we've built a tracking system. If you're looking to build a tracking system, you're not using SoStock at this moment, a Kanban view is really great for that. That's one of the things that we set up is just a Kanban view so you can see all of your orders. You know, this one's in production, that one's in on a boat, that one's on a plane, this one's arriving at the 3PL, and that one's going to Amazon. Just kind of an overall view of the flow of your inventory process. And then getting reorder alerts, and then managing your FBA, your third-party warehouse inventory, and everything on order, so you can see all of your inventory in one place. Sometimes just not tracking everything can cause over and under ordering. All right, last, and then I'm going to give you a couple more tips at the end. But SoStock, so SoStock.com, just a little bit about SoStock. We have a customizable and understandable forecast. You're able to manipulate the various different data points. It's really what we built the software to do, is believing that you know more about your Amazon business than anybody else does. And so on a SKU level, you can adjust things based on sponsored ads you have coming up, ad campaigns, growth strategies, lightning deals, factoring sales spikes, seasonality, and stockouts into your equation, and getting reorder alerts to avoid stocking out, looking at both your transfers and your orders from your supplier, and then tracking everything, creating POs and creating transfer orders to your 3PLs. And then we work with you to get your account up and running. We can do free migration. So if you have a spreadsheet and you need help moving your system into the SoStock system, you need one-on-one time to be coached with the software or consulted on how best to arrange things. We do all of that. And so that's pretty much it. I did want to share with you a couple other tips that we have for cash flow. So we talked about very briefly about needing to restructure things, and some of the things that were not in my slides are something that I call the 4-part logistics machine. I do believe that everyone should have a fulfillment center at this time. You can usually get a fulfillment center attached to your 3PL. You just need to make sure that they have the capacity to handle replenishments to Amazon, as well as fulfillment orders, especially when Christmas comes up. So you would have your FBA, you would have your 3PL/fulfillment center. But then if you are importing from overseas, I would recommend talking to your supplier about whether they're able to keep your inventory. A lot of times your supplier will keep your inventory in their warehouse for up to 3 months, maybe even longer, depending on your relationship, and they won't charge you for it. So that's a way to save money on the fees. And another thing that you can talk to them about is only paying the final payment on anything that you ship. So you could, for example, have 4-month order and you pay 30% down for 4 months worth of inventory. You store everything there, you ship out the first month of inventory, and they have everything else in their storage facility, and you only pay 70% on that 1 month that you shipped. And then the next month comes around and you ship the next month's inventory, and you pay the 70% on that other month's inventory. And so you know that you have inventory that's being produced, but you're not having to pay the brunt of that cost. It's something to consider in terms of evening out your cash flow, and then you have more money for marketing, you have more money to invest in more products. This is especially something that you could pitch to a supplier that you're getting more that you're launching different products with. So if you say, that we are going to launch a couple more products using your factory, but we would need to restructure it to look like this. It's something that's actually quite common. So if you are not able to get that arrangement, you might want to talk to someone who is good at negotiating with suppliers in their language, such as a Chinese negotiator or a negotiator who speaks Chinese. But I think it's essentially one of the new ways that we're going to be able to handle all of this the shifting, the additional fees that are occurring along the way, and Amazon no longer kind of taking the brunt of our storage. Any questions that came up along the way? I know that we had a couple that we answered, and then there was a question here that I wanted to get to. Simon asked, will you cover appealing for inventory limit increases? So when might they start allowing increases? So I would say that, you know, now would be around now, we should hopefully start seeing the increases. They did say that, you know, there was rumors that this would be increasing as Prime Day was over. So I haven't heard anyone saying that there has been huge increases at this point, but hopefully soon. And then as far as appealing, I haven't heard anyone really successfully doing that. The only successes have been people who've gotten approval and then a couple of days later that, you know, the increase went away. So I don't have too much good news on that. I don't know if anyone else has any data on that who wants to kind of chime in the chat. All right, I don't think there's any other questions. SoStock is available. You can get a free demo, and then we have it priced at $79 for life. It won't go up based on your orders. That's only going to be for a short time. We're going to be launching a increase to the price very soon, but hope you check it out. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks so much for joining me.